Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Inner Insights. I'm really looking forward to talking to Dr. Sue Redmond today. You're very welcome to the podcast, Sue.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Dara. It's a real privilege to be here chatting with you.
Likewise, Sue. I'm really excited to get into these topics today that we're going to discuss. So just to give you listeners a little bit of background around Dr. Redmond, she is an integrative somatic trauma therapist, somatic EMDR practitioner, and a therapeutic yoga teacher with over 20 years of experience in the fields of well-being, leadership, and trauma healing. She holds a PhD in youth leadership, resilience, and social support, alongside qualifications in health promotion, pharmacology, psychology, youth and community work, and coaching. Sue's work spans one-to-one therapy, psychedelic assisted somatic therapy, and group facilitation, as well as training and resource development for professionals working with children and young people. At the heart of her mission is creating safe spaces for healing, resilience, and transformation, blending science, somatic wisdom, and creativity to guide people and communities toward greater awareness, empowerment, and joy. Well, Sue, what a wonderful background you have. I'm really excited to explore all of these topics with you today. I want to start a little bit on, I feel like I had my first catharsis or somatic body-based experience over 10 years ago through holotropic breathwork and also Cambo, which is it's not a psychedelic, but it's a plant medicine or animal medicine that can create a lot of shift in emotions from the body. And ever since then, I've just been so fascinated by the power of the body, the trauma that we hold and its ability to heal and release stuck emotions, blocked emotions, and to shift not only our body state, but also our mental state. So I just want to preface our conversation today, a little bit about that and why I'm so interested in this and just all the current science and what we're starting to understand about the body's role in healing now. But I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself. What was kind of like your healing journey into all of this wonderful stuff that you now embody and teach?
So mine was a little bit winding. I probably had my first real somatic experiencing work in my early 20s. So, and even a little bit before that, like my childhood had a certain flavor of trauma in it. A lot of hypervigilance and challenges, shall we say, in our family system. And then in my teenage years, a lot of bullying and I suppose humiliation, teachers and things like that. And I just felt my whole system curled down. So that kind of freeze response being really prevalent in me. So somebody that could have held her head up high for, having a lot of reasons to maybe, but actually completely became incredibly shy, closed down. And I started martial arts as a teenager. So that initial, like seeing how martial arts took me from this closed down, frozen, and what we know now from polyvagal theory and understanding like what neuroscience says about the freeze response, we have to actually move into a sympathetic fight or flight. And intuitively, my body just knew. I liked watching Karate Kid. I liked watching lots of martial arts movies in the 80s and 90s. And then I was like, I actually need to do some martial arts. And so I started that like a teenager. And so at some level, it was subconscious. What I was doing, but it actually got me to put my head back on my shoulders and be able to stand with a little bit more strength within me. And then when I finished my degree, which is in pharmacology and psychology, I moved into using community work because I wanted to really go back and heal with intention, the bullying and that sense of disconnect that I had in my own system. So I started working with teenagers, and alongside that, parallel that with yoga, meditation, got very into Vipassana, and then discovered Peter Levine's work like in my later 20s. And it was just like this, like meditation and somatic experiencing, somatic work is so powerful. On the one hand, meditation is like, can I be okay with what's happening? And then somatic experiencing and somatic work is really inviting you into, and can you allow process from your system and metabolize emotion and energy that's gotten trapped? So if you think back to that freeze response that was in my system, And appeasement was another that was very strong within me. That needing to discharge the energy. So fight, flight, those energies had to be moved through the system. And then we come back to the top of the polyvagal ladder, which is a ventral vagal state. So we come into this nice, calm, rest and digest, peaceful place. But what's funny is when we find ourselves on these journeys, we find sometimes peace is so alien to us that we want to disrupt that peace, and we'll actually create more drama, and we'll look for ways to disturb that peace, because we'll have other subconscious energies and things that haven't been processed running the system. And so some of that, like Shrek says, we're like an onion. Our healing takes layers. And I guess in college, part of my pharmacology journey was experimenting with rats with MDMA. So that was a very fascinating and a privilege, to have Trinity make MDMA for me and to be giving it to rats in UCD. So that was a wonderful project to be involved in. But really, like, understanding, what was happening in people's bodies, and more so than the party scene, just interested in how that it evolved from couples therapy and really how it brought people together. So just a real interest in to how psychedelics and other substances could really support people on their healing journey. They're just one of the keys. So I suppose my journey has been a little bit, like everybody's journey. You couldn't necessarily say that was what you were going to go into if somebody asked you, and what do you want to be when you grow up? But when you look back, you can see that each of those points was pivotal in the who that you become, and certainly the who that I became, and still becoming. And I guess one thing to touch on as well was in my 20s, there would have been some sexual violence. And so just, I think, having grown up minimizing a lot of things, that too was really minimized within my own system, and didn't really come to acknowledge or own that till much later, because it didn't feel safe enough to. And sometimes we need that relational safety, as well as the environment telling us that something deeper it needs to be unfolded. So I would say for my own journey, I've had a buffet of little traumas to pick from. And in that, I guess it gives me a deep understanding of the people that come into my room that I work with. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, beautiful. And I'm sure challenging as well, having a lot of these kind of things happen to you. I think, what's it called? ACE scores, is that where they have, if people have multiple of these things, maybe each one is or isn't significant, but as they build up over time, it gets kind of on top of people, and then people going into that kind of deep freeze state. That's kind of how I understand it. And how do you feel like you haven't had all these experiences and this personal healing journey? How do you feel that now informs your work as a practitioner?
It's pivotal in a lot of ways, because I think if I hadn't had some of those scars, I don't think I would be able to sit with the same level of understanding and empathy with some of the people that I meet. But it's also brought within me a deep curiosity as to how to bring people back to joy, how to bring myself back to joy, because I fundamentally believe that's what we're here for. We're designed, we come into this place as beautiful, joyful beings. If we're healthy and don't have any medical needs, a tiny baby is just pure joy when their needs are met. And then we come in with this gorgeous blueprint of the who that we could be, just like an acorn gets to be this oak. But if we plant it in a really rocky area with not a lot of nourishment, then it's going to grow a little bit gnarled. And if the wind, like it is here in Lahinch, is very sideways, that poor oak tree might be a little bit slanted. And so our environment plays a huge factor in the who that we become. And as we start to maybe take some of those rocks away, build some shelter around that oak, it can get to become a mightier, stronger oak with support in the environment. And so for me, it's as we then look at how maybe our parents or our culture have created these imprints on this blueprint of who our potential to be, that then we can start to unravel those and come back. So a lot of it is an unlearning, because the joy is already within us. The spirit is already within us. And it's as much a spiritual journey to come back to the love and the light that is always there within you, as it is a healing journey. And I really find that as we start to unpack these threads, there's more joy, because we have to acknowledge sometimes the grief, sometimes the sadness, sometimes the anger. Often it's the anger, particularly in women's bodies, that has been really pushed down quite significantly, that disconnects them from the who that they are. And because we're culturalized to be good girls, to be nice, and it's not okay to show or feel your anger. I meet a lot of people that have suppressed anger, and it shows up in lots of different ways, sometimes in arthritis, sometimes in other diseases in the body. But as people start to touch into that sacred anger or rage,
Mm.
part of the energy that's used to push that down gets liberated. So if you think about pushing down a beach ball here in Lahinch, it takes a lot of energy. And if over a lifetime I give you Dara another 2 or 3 to push down into the water, it becomes quite exhausting to hold those down. And as we meet the protective parts that want to keep that anger safe, because it was never safe to touch into that anger before, because maybe it was met with hostility or violence. As you meet that anger, or meet the protective part first, and it becomes okay to touch into the anger, then that anger is released for living, and people start to heal from remarkable things. So it's a real privilege. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, beautiful. Absolutely. I love that analogy of the oak getting a bit of space, and being having a
Mm.
little bit of protection and safety, because I feel like a lot of this work, embodiment work as well, is giving yourself kind of the permission to feel what's there, what's been trapped. And um I heard this a number of years ago, that normally, under the anger, there's grief and there's sadness, and like
Mm.
anger is like the top layer. I think for men
Yeah.
men who repress and push down anger, it leaks out in their behaviors: passive aggressiveness, violence, dominance, controlling behaviors. And these are all there to just not feel what's kind of really going on for them
Yeah.
on that kind of that deeper level. And then
100%.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and if you think about anger, like if you look at a small child, a toddler, for example, and if you just see them in their average day, and they might get told, "No, don't climb on that. No, don't pick on your sister. Don't take the food off the floor," and they hear all these little no's, and they register in their body as these little stressors. And then at the end of the day, if you give them peas on top of the potatoes or a broken biscuit, they literally lose it. They lose it. And it's such a healthy response to discharge that energy. And if we can, as loving, compassionate parents, hold space for that tantrum without trying to judge it, or think that we're going to fail them if they don't know how to manage their emotion, if we can just hold space and let that anger rise, it passes away. And then they come back to being really cooperative, and a little tired, but they come back to a sense of calm. And what they learn from our holding that space, that anger, is that our anger doesn't scare them. They don't feel fear off of us when we can hold that space for anger. So they learn that anger is not a bad thing. Anger is actually trying to tell you something important, about boundaries. They're like healthy little white cells, white blood cells, and T cells. They want to fight for your boundaries. And I see that when women start to release their anger and sadness and everything that comes with it, their bodies actually start to feel better. So their immune system stops attacking themselves in some cases. And so I find it fascinating then, and for men then as well, they're often told, don't cry, don't cry. And yet there's such healing in tears.
Mm.
Tears are often the medicine. And so as we come through these layers of tears and sadness and anger, we come to learn that actually they're not bad. Anxiety, we pathologize anxiety like it's a bad thing. Anxiety is your body going on loudspeaker to go, hey, Dara, I need you to focus now. Something really important is happening. But what we learn is to fear our body. And because that little toddler was told, it's not okay to be angry, eat your peas, don't be giving out about that dinner, then they learn, oh my God, I have to make this big journey from my body that was wisely discharging the energy up into my head. And I live up here in my head now, being hyper vigilant to what does everybody else need or think? What do they need? And so we deny our own feelings because we've been told it's not safe to feel angry because I'll get the shit kicked out of me, or
Mm.
something else will happen. And
Mhm.
so in this work, it's really bringing people back into those younger parts often, where they get to meet and and meet them in the way that they would have loved to discharge the energy. So there might be shaking, there might be trembling, there might be tears, there might even be screaming or punching a pillow. But it's not because I say do that. It's because it organically arises from within the person. And that's the difference. And it has to be trusting in that person's innate capacity to heal and really holding space for that to unfold.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel that, there's touching on anger, there's a lot to be angry about in the world right now. And I love this idea of, owning our anger and sacred rage, and, being able to channel that anger for good and making change in the world. And I feel like in Ireland, we're kind of like a nation of recovering people pleasers, where we let people cross our boundaries. We don't take care of our needs. We do things beyond our capacity. We put others first, even if we're burnt out, tired, depressed, anxious. We'll always help the other person rather than take care of ourselves. I think a lot of people out there kind of operate from a cup half empty at the moment. And then that kind of builds resentment, doesn't it? Like people kind of push down the anger, and then that kind of leaks out, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Like if you come back to the volcano, like that volcano was full, and you think about your my lifetime, and if we never get the chance to process some of that anger, somebody tips off of it, or there's traffic getting into Cork City or Galway, and you're suddenly like tense, and the anger's coming out in unhealthful ways. Whereas what we want to do is we want to allow that anger to titrate it out in a more healthy way so that it can be seen as an ally. And when we see that, actually, a lot like the warrior pose in yoga, like what is it important for us to fight for? Because we can discharge our energy in lots of different ways, and we can put a lot of that energy into other people. Like you say, people pleasing or appeasement it's a really important survival strategy, because it keeps you safe. It means you're always looking around trying to see, well, what does anybody else need? But it does mean you don't necessarily know what you need. And so the journey then is to come home to feeling like, what is it that I need? Because it's really hard to communicate in a relationship if you don't know what you need. You'll end out fighting and blaming them for all of your problems. And you won't own, oh my God, my need was for connection. Right there. The reason I was nagging was for connection or something else, It's like, and why aren't you home? And da 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 da. It's not, when we live in our heads, we actually end up trying to solve ourselves as if we're some problem to be fixed. But when we come home to the body, we realize, oh my God, there's nothing to fix. We're actually already whole and perfect and complete. And it's back to joy. It's home to joy, as opposed to there's something wrong with you. Take this medication. Your anxiety is wrong. You shouldn't be angry. It's like, actually, no. Obviously, we don't want to hurt anybody. So we want to learn ways of being with these emotions. But it's like saying regulation is the only important thing, getting to the top of that ladder, that nice ventral vagal state of the polyvagal nerve. But actually, dysregulation, that sympathetic fight and flight, is also really important. It's not bad or wrong. It's just telling you important information. And the same freeze it's really important for survival and collapse. So all of these, and even appeasement, and we move between them all of the time. So what I deal with is a lot of people when they get stuck in one of these, and try to bring them back to that sense of wholeness by allowing those different parts to speak. And as you say, there's a lot of stuff to be angry about in the world. And so we really need to take care. There's a lovely quote by a man whose name eludes me right now, but it's like, the times are urgent, we must slow down. Yeah.
Beautiful quote. And I really feel like the antidote for a lot of this is some of the practice that you work with, and I've been learning over the years as well: yoga, meditation, breath work. These are all practices to get us into the body, to help us to feel. I know in the men's work that I do, a lot of men are so disconnected from the body. They're, head up, and you're right. People don't know what they need, or what their body's saying, or what their body's signaling. And I love that you touched on other movement practices to kind of discharge energy and to work with emotions. I'd love for you to chat a little bit about embodiment practices, and how these practices can really support us in these times, because there's such a huge wave at the moment. Well, I think the wave of the moment is breath work. 10 years ago was yoga, or even longer, and meditation's been there for forever in the background. But it really feels like, people are really moving more and more towards these practices to feel, and same with psychedelics.
Yeah. And so, there's lots of different ways in, isn't there? Like, you can run with intention, and that can help you discharge some things. But you can just run, and that may not have the same effect. You can do some martial arts, and that can get you to some level of discharge of the emotion. But then there's always a more subconscious level. There's another layer to the onion, isn't there? Dance can be amazing. Like 5 rhythms is just so beautiful. Ecstatic dance, there are lovely ways in. Yoga is like, I think when I started doing yoga, it was probably very athletic and probably led into my own ego of, can I bend like that person beside me? More so, yeah, like real comparative and athletic almost. And then it was like, actually, real yoga for me is like, it's really engaging into the body and being inside your skin, not out looking at anybody else. It's noticing what's happening inside. So it's really turning the attention inside, and then having a nice pranayama, and then samadhi at the end. Like, that's the asana is one part of an 8-limb practice. And so when you bring all those 8 limbs in, it becomes much more embodied. Then I think the extractive nature of our Western culture is we like the contortionist twisting yourself around into a pretzel. So we'll take that over here and kick the shit out of ourselves because we can't do any of that, because none of us have been sitting cross-legged on a floor since we were 4 or younger. So and then, like, there's lots of other ways in. So dance is a lovely way. You can be into nature. Surfing is a lovely way. Like, literally anything that gets you out of your body, out of your head and into your body, out of your body, out of your head and into your body. So being in nature, walking, but all of those things, you can walk and you can not be in your body. You can dance and not be in your body, but any place or any way that you can bring yourself in. And so it could be something as simple as this, just a little 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 practice of, so just for people listening in this moment, if they were to look around the room, and as you look around the room, just notice one thing. And then as you stop with that one thing, just notice how you are in relationship to it. You're not separate from it. Something's happening inside your body as you look at it. And maybe you see it as pleasant or unpleasant. You attach a story. Then let the story drop. But notice the sensation. Notice how your body receives it. This is a dual awareness. So then you can become embodied without having to do anything fandangly. You can just become in your body by being in relationship with one object. And then you shift to another object and you allow the light of that object in. So you create this dual awareness. So I can notice things outside, but I really start to notice, what's the relationship that's happening inside me? And then you shift to another thing. And so you start with 5 things that you look around your room, and you maybe notice the color and the texture and the shadow and the light. And you see what happens as I register that thing. Now I'm in relationship to the moment. I'm no longer living in the past. I'm no longer projecting into the future. I'm right here in this present moment, this beautiful, precious moment. And as I do that, then I can shift to another sense. And maybe it's sound. So it could be the sound of my voice. It could be the sound of things outside. And you notice, are you caught in labeling it as good or bad? And then can you drop the story? Because we're judging all the time. And when I let that judgment go, then what's happening in my body? How does my body receive the sound? Is it pleasant, unpleasant? Can I let go of the judgment? And then see again, how does it register? Is there an expansion, a contraction? Your body speaks in sensation, density, tightness, ease, lightness, expansion. And so this is your body trying to speak to you and say, oh yeah. And then we know, if I connect with things in this way, it's nourishing. So we might have, and then you move to another sense. So something that you can touch. So you might be touching your clothes or a table. It might be then moving into something that you can smell and something you can taste. So that little 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 practice will orient you to the right here, right now in just a very simple way. But what you do is you start to notice how you are in relationship to that moment. And it is the quickest antidote to living in another place or time, which is often our past, worrying about things we can't change, or our future and worrying about things that may never happen. And so that coming home to the body is a very intentional way of being. It's like, oh yeah, no, I can be here. And then we notice as I'm here with this, maybe the book that you're looking at, then how am I in relationship to everything else? How am I in relation to the world? And if something triggers me or stimulates a reaction within me, if it stirs something, it's like, what is it about that thing that is activating in me? Why would I let that thing disturb my peace?
Mm,
And what is it that wants to be uncovered?
mm.
That kind of linking. And
Yeah,
gardening could be embodied, and
yes.
you know,
I love my gardening. I'm definitely out there trying to be in the present moment with whatever's right in front of me. And no, I
mm,
absolutely love all that, and fully, yeah, feel how important it is to keep coming back to the moment that is, yeah, the present
mm,
moment.
yeah,
I know the work of Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now,
mm,
Thich Nhat Hanh, You Are Here. These wonderful books came into my life at a point when I was so dysregulated and so out of my body with social media, with alcohol, with stress, anxiety, and depression, and just coming back to now and trying to feel some sense of peace in the body and allow is such a big journey for people, and it's one of
mm,
the most beautiful and important journeys I think somebody can go on, and it's a deeply spiritual and can be a deeply profound journey. But yeah, I absolutely I love the senses to pull us back into the present moment,
yeah,
and these practices as well. I feel like these practices are like the foundation to a healthy and
mm,
happy life. I feel like they should be taught in every school. Like every kid should be doing
yeah,
some form of movement practice, whether it's yoga or a martial art,
mm,
and some form of mindfulness meditation and connecting to their breath and moving
mm,
the body. I feel like we as a society need more of these to regulate ourselves and to
yeah.
create health and well-being.
Completely. And like if you think about even just that little practice, um, when we're in the present moment and we haven't dealt with some of the trauma from the past, it is literally pushing up and it becomes like this almost like a background noise that you're not even fully aware of. You've become so used to the background noise that you just think it's there. And then as you unpack this stuff, suddenly the background noise seems to go away and you're like, oh wow, there's a level of peace here because no longer the trauma that was in your past is living right here, right now. It actually becomes weightless. It loses, so you can connect with some of the things that are, deeply traumatic from your childhood or from your life, and they don't hold the same charge in your system. You're like, oh, I can hold that. It's not like you've changed the situation. The situation is still there, but you've changed your relationship to it and your capacity to hold it, and that younger self that maybe experienced that with love just really expands the capacity to be in the right here, right now, present moment. And so it
Mm.
links me to something that I think is just really lovely. Like Deb Dana talks about glimmers.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, and just instead of triggers and being stirred or stimulated by something, just intentionally focusing on something that feels like a glimmer. And if you can't see something in your world today, let it be something from your mind's eye, like the color of the ocean when the water hits it, and it
Mm.
like sunset, and just really allow yourself to drink in and savor the good. We don't do that enough. And actually, the more we do that, focusing on it, even if you connect with something now, you'll notice your internal biochemistry changes. Like you actually become your own pharmacy. So you can take other drugs or you can just be your own pharmacy. It's much
Mm.
more economical. And so things like gratitude, literally
Yes.
practicing gratitude for 15 minutes a day will boost your immune system. So connecting with things, not just on a thought level, but at an emotional level. And you can really feel how, oh my God, actually the whole biochemistry changes.
Mm. No, no, I absolutely, I think that's so important. It's so important to have the positivity and the joy in it, because I feel like when a lot of people come to the work, it feels like very heavy. It feels very dense. It's
Yeah.
like everyone's working on their traumas, everyone's working on their triggers, everyone's working under this regulation, and it's it can get kind of, people get kind of bogged down
Yeah.
and kind of identify with it all, and then get stuck in the spiritual trap then
Yeah.
on the other side. But I think there's something really to be said for your work around the somatic trauma work, and therapy and being in
Mm,
therapy. I've been in therapy the
yeah.
last number of years, and it's been phenomenal in my growth because therapists can really sit there and they're well, supposed to not be biased, but they can really reflect to you and be honest with you,
Mm,
dialogue, and they're giving you that positive regard and compassion and
mm.
bringing you into a safe space to feel. Yeah, what do you kind of see in your work with somatic therapy, and how the body how the body holds this trauma and then
Yeah.
how it's released?
Yeah, and like therapy is wonderful. It really is, and uh, psychotherapy can really get people to understand what's happening in their life. Really give a lot of compassion into their experience, and then I find often then people maybe come towards this work because they've kind of talked themselves a lot, and they've nothing less to talk about, and there's more still going on inside. And as they come into the body, it's really how that some of that story is held and how it needs to move through their system. And it's a slightly different quality at some level to psychotherapy. And psychotherapy is wonderful. And this just brings it, and it's like another layer of consciousness that you're bringing into the work that you're really getting to explore. And most often what I find is people leave lighter. So as you say, oh, people are working on their stuff and their triggers. Like, if you look at CBT, we're often going, well, what's the trigger? What's the trigger? And, how are you going to manage that? And we're doing it from a very cognitive place. Whereas then if we come into something like EMDR or a more embodied space where the natural alternative just emerges. It's like, oh, that belief that you couldn't, you kept bumping up against, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. And something like EMDR, like eye movement desensitization reprocessing, just like, oh, what was that belief again? Because your brain has literally like shattered the gate that it's keeping you in. And like there'll be times maybe it pops in again, but ultimately as we reprocess what's been held in our systems, a new narrative, a new possibility just opens up. And it's like that bit I was saying, it brings us back to possibility, to hope. It's not toxic positivity. It's like, oh, there is hope and there's possibility.
Mm.
And it's like the lovely saying, as a Carl Jung says, the cave that we least want to enter is where our treasure is. And it's so true, because we don't want to go there. And often we can dabble with this stuff on our own, and that has absolute merit and value. And sometimes we need somebody to be with us to help us feel safe enough to go into that cave. Because what we do is we re-establish the pattern of I'm too much.
Mhm.
Nobody can handle this. And we just keep ourselves stuck in this little loop as well. So that can be really frustrating. Like you say, you get stuck in this spiritual thing of going around in a circle, but not making any necessary progress. But we have to go into those deep, dark places. And anytime we do, we eventually come out. We do. It
Yeah,
does get better. It does.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I read something recently that in I think was might be a bit of a sidestep, but in relationships that women feel too much for the partners and men feel not enough. I read that recently and I was like, I wonder what's going on there from a relational kind of dynamic. I wonder if you have any
Yeah.
insights there.
Well, what I find sometimes interesting is how we can get stuck in those energy centers as women and men, and so if you think about the first energy center or chakra
Mhm.
system, is to do with security. The second one, creativity. Women can get a lot of stuck there with shame and guilt. And then
Mhm.
for men, like the third energy center, that ego, power, and control space can be quite dominant. So for a guy, maybe there's a bit more sense of needing to control, but also it's the shadow, isn't it? I'm not good enough, so I'm going to have to shadow. And then
Mhm.
for the woman, it's like, or I'm ignoring the shadow. And we have to actually shine a light on our shadow. And so then for the woman, maybe there's a lot of shame and guilt. And then it's like, well, we've got that generationally for sure, as well as in the female body right here, right now. And so with that shadow and guilt is like, oh God, I'm too much. I'm too much. So we're kind of dancing around each other, but we're living in these lower energy centers, and we have to make this journey up. And so there's some lovely breath practices and breath work where we draw the energy out of these energy centers up into the heart and up to the top of the head. And they literally shift shift and change people from the inside out. So if you think about resonating at that higher energy center and getting the energetic resonance of this highest self to resonate with this maybe security, if security or a lack of trust and safety are an issue, doing this particular breath practice can really support somebody in finding safeness and trust in their own system. Because until we find it in ourselves, we keep projecting that unsafeness out into the world. So the journey is to come in and to do it within ourselves. And so the somatic work and then meditation and yoga and certainly these energy centers are incredibly powerful and have a huge subconscious role to play in how we live our lives. And so for me, when you say that, I think that's probably what may be happening there. There's the shadow of, and when we live in a place of shame and guilt for women, or ego, power and control for men, we're going to bump heads a little bit, but we want to make that really long journey up into our hearts. It's just a couple of inches higher, but it's hard. And like as Michael Singer says, we have to keep our hearts open, but it is so easy to let them close down. And then we feel resentment in relationship because somebody didn't do something or the other, or one person feels like they're taking on too much, particularly possibly the woman. And then she's been maybe a bit people pleasing and not identifying her need to ask for help and builds that resentment. And then it comes out in a cancer of some sort. Whereas if we found our way in to acknowledge what we needed, and often if we ask for help, most often in our relationships, if we've made a fairly reasonable choice with the human that we've decided to cohabitate with, they want to meet us. And when we're vulnerable about our needs, it activates something in their heart that only makes them want to move towards that. It's when we live in our head and we start to blame them. You didn't empty the dishwasher and you didn't do this and you didn't do that. Well, then we become the nag that we never wanted to be. And that starts to erode the love that is still there, but it gets clouded over all this other stuff that's not cleaned up within our systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. It's never about the dishes.
Never dishes.
Never about the dishes.
No.
And I love that, like, I've been studying this the last number of years, shadow work, and Carl Jung says, if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So it's like these programs or these patterns that have been kind of cemented or laid down probably very early in relation to your mother, your father, your first relationships, and how then they can direct your life. You hold on to these beliefs, you repress these feelings, you resign into the shadow. It's not safe to articulate yourself. It's not safe to put your boundaries down. It's not safe to speak up for yourself. And then you just repress it and hide it all down. And then you're always coming from this lower vibration, fear-based place, and you can't actually connect. And it's kind of like two adults fighting is like two children fighting. They're just looking for connection, see me, validate me, be with me, are you safe?
That's completely it. And often I find, with people, I end up bringing them into that younger self, and then they see their partner as that maybe 4-year-old or 5-year-old, and so much compassion can open up. And it's the same with their parents. They can see their parents as demons before, and then really everyone is innocent underneath it all. And when they come to really resolving and letting go of forgiveness is letting go of the possibility of a better past. So, and forgiveness may not resonate, but just accepting, that was how I came into the world. This was what happened. And as we come to accept it and acknowledge the impact it had on us, sometimes we can bypass that as well and go to compassion for the other person first and ignore what's really been held here. And that's just another way of gaslighting yourself. So, but as you come into that point of like really seeing that vulnerable part and meeting it with love, you lay a new foundation for how you weren't met. And then it becomes possible to meet your parents from that more authentic, loving place and have that relationship that you would love with them. Which often, relationships are complicated. Like being human is an absolute crazy thing. Like that any of us thought that this was a good idea to come in here. I think we all took bets and said, I'm going to remember first. I'm going to remember that this is just a dream and it's all love and light, yeah? And then we come in and life just does its thing and we forget and we have to do a whole journey back to wholeness,
Mm-hmm.
which is remembering and sticking on parts of ourselves that have
Mm-hmm.
been, pushed away and told, I don't want to hear this vulnerable part. I don't want to listen to this protective part. I want to push them away. They've had too much airtime. But
Mm-hmm.
as we can bathe them in light and love, then those shadow parts, they dissolve. Doesn't mean that we don't ever have shadows. We all have shadows.
Yeah, and I think it's also, welcoming the wholeness of being a human, and
Mm,
um, being with the shadow and being with the light, and accepting that like life is hard and we're in this fire and brimstone of soul school. And I really feel like right now we're getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed more and more and more, and it's like, well, really, what's true for me? Am I really connecting to, my joy, my happiness, my purpose, and my values, and what I stand for? And is this in my integrity? And it's getting squeezed and squeezed, and we're seeing exactly who we don't want to be out there in the world, and how we don't want to
mm,
go. And it's kind of like, well, like, are we going to make a stand for that in ourselves?
mm,
And I really feel like this is huge work at the moment. And, a lot of people are talking about intergenerational trauma as well. And this is like the work of generations, really, isn't it? It's like personal, collective, and then, you know, intergenerational.
yeah. Like and it's a lot, really, isn't it? When you think about this land in particular, just the trauma that has happened here. When you think about, we've lost culture, we've lost language, we have lost connection to the ancient practices that are being reclaimed now, for sure. But we lost our sovereignty, and we lost a lot of things, and we lost a sense of connection within the generations, because fathers were told not to talk to their children. So we had all this dysfunction arise, and then we had famine and war. So this little island alone carries a huge weight of trauma, and then we drink it, and we celebrate that drinking by putting pubs all around the world and become known for that. But
And
but I
national
think
drinking day.
yeah, it becomes a way of dealing with that trauma. Like in, like, was it 2007? I think I wrote a resource, one of the first around drug and alcohol education in the country, for people that work with young people, and it was really to look at, well, what is the reason, what is the mechanism of action? So pharmacology kind of interests me. What's the mechanism of action that's happening, and why is a particular person drawn to this drug or that drug? Why is somebody drawn, magnetized towards heroin or cocaine or, you know weed? Like, what is it about them? And at a fundamental level, it's because heroin offers a hug, like a mother, that if you've never had that, and suddenly heroin gives you that, this is the hole that it's filling, and suddenly addiction becomes very easy to understand. They're not bad people, they're just broken, and
Mhm.
they're looking for, like, the love and the joy that they maybe didn't have as a kid. And it's very easy to demonize somebody that has an addiction, or and have that whole, look at America, war on drugs approach to things. But it doesn't actually deal with the very humanness, that people have a lot of trauma and difficulty with coping with being human. And as you say, the squeeze is huge. Just to look at what's happening in the world, it's enough to help people lose their minds. But that squeeze, well, hopefully with that squeeze, we'll make some diamonds.
Mhm. No, absolutely. And we need those diamonds to
Mm,
radiate their light in the world right
mm,
now. And I love the work of Dr. Brian Penny. I don't know if you've come across him. He was a heroin addict, and went through a whole process, got himself clean, did a PhD in
mm,
neuroscience, and now he's kind of sharing a lot around this.
yeah,
It's like seeing addiction as not just a surface level thing. It's, these are human beings that are suffering, that are
mm,
in pain,
yeah,
that have fallen through the cracks, that society has demonized and stigmatized them, and made them the perpetrators and outcasts. And I really feel like, as well, with the work of Gabriel Mate now, that a lot of these kind of conversations are happening, and we're starting to see um, that we need more compassion for these people in the world. Um, and working with this trauma, I know this concept of like titration as well is important. Can you speak to that, and how, if someone has a lot of trauma, how do they start to work with it, and how do
mm.
they? how do you approach how do you
Yeah. Yeah. So if you think about again, like the volcano, like if we just go at that straight away and it'll just erupt, and it can be too much too soon, can also be traumatic. So if we try to take the lid off and deal with everything in one go, and sometimes people do want that, they'll come and they'll be like, I have a whole truckload of stuff here. Will an hour do it, Sue? And you're like, oh, I know I'm good, but like, yeah. So there's that bit of like titrating. It means we'll go at a little bit at a time, because if it becomes too much, there's a fear of somebody disassociating, fear of them becoming completely dysregulated and unable to manage and come back and to be safe in their world. So like some of this work can be very deep when you go into it with them, and so as we titrate it in, it might be finding some resources. And so when I say a resource, I mean something that brings a sense of ease into the body. And so connecting into to things that bring ease, and then going towards something. And if it feels safe enough, going a little bit deeper. And if it feels safe enough, going a little bit deeper, because the body will shut down anything that doesn't feel safe enough. It'll go back into that polyvagal ladder, freeze, fight or flight. And that person may want to run out of the room, or they may explode. And then following that explosion might follow a lot of shame and guilt over an embarrassment over, Jesus, that was a lot, it was too much. And not that, the therapist would think that, but their protective system would do that so that they wouldn't go any deeper, because the protective system is invested in keeping them the same. So as we titrate in and make sure that it's safe enough, and they go at a rate, and one person's rate can be vastly different to another's. One person might have to go and at a really extraordinarily slow rate by my perception, but that can feel like a huge step for them. And then another person might be like, well, I just want to deal with it all right away. And look at we've all seen those people that come on a retreat and take a load of stuff, and it's pretty intense for everybody. So it's finding a way that works, that doesn't dysregulate them, and means that they can manage what they're uncovering. Like, I don't know, did you ever hear Tim Ferriss talk about the time he went on a Vipassana retreat and he took a lot of assisted therapy, shall we say, a lot of medicine, and he basically blew his mind open, like in an unhealthy and an unhelpful way. But he was lucky, to be surrounded by a lot of very skilled facilitators. And so it's just that sometimes we think, oh, this is good, this is a good idea. Now, maybe it was what he needed. Maybe it was the dynamite that was needed to blow open the safe that had all of this unprocessed, unknown trauma that he had in his life. But you can go at it in other ways that are just less destabilizing, because obviously you want people to be able to manage their lives, manage their relationships, be okay with their kids, things like that. So as we move towards this, it can be a little bit scary as well, what we'll uncover. Like, certainly memories are not the goal with EMDR or anything like that. But sometimes they come up, and sometimes people discover, oh shit, there was something there and that's part of what's running the system that they weren't aware of before. And so as the light shines on it, it can be a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm definitely a firm believer in, working within our kind of our windows of tolerance, and, building up our capacity to feel, and also our nervous system, not overloading and frying our nervous system is so important. And I think in my own journey as well, like some of the big catharsis I've had have been amazing. Like they've been wonderful for me. They've worked for me. But I think as the years go on, I also notice, well, there's so much value in doing things a little bit slower, and, not going straight for that. Like on new therapy, give me the highest dose, or whatever it is. It's like, oh, maybe I can actually step it up, because one of my teachers actually said to me about this. He's like, well, that's actually not compassionate to self if you're constantly blasting yourself out there, or constantly frying yourself or frying your nervous system. But you're right, for some people, they need this big emotional release, they need this big cathartic release. But for some people, slow and steady, especially people who've had lots of challenges or trauma or safety issues, it's they don't even feel safe in their body, let alone safe for other people. So how are they going to navigate this and regulate themselves I think that's important.
It,
It's really important to have people to help you to co-regulate as well, and that's why I think
yeah,
it's really important to have facilitators before, during, and after uh,
yeah,
any of these kind of cathartic emotional release processes.
yeah. And it's a little bit about dosage as well. What might be the right dose for one person, whether that's a somatic piece of work or it's a psychedelic piece of work, can be too much for another person. So it's
Yeah,
really been mindful of that dosage, so that then they can they can move towards it without being the system being overwhelmed. Like you said there, like it's compassionate to not throw yourself, keep running at the wall, keep throwing yourself into it, because that has the energy of I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. I need to fix it. Um, and so when we kind of can sit into the place of, oh, actually, I'm just uncovering, we can maybe uncover with a little bit more gentleness. And certainly, look, at there's times to be the samurai and want to go to war with yourself. And then there's times to be that more compassionate person. I know I was samuraiing initially, with meditation. It was just like, yeah, go hard, go really hard. And then it's like, actually, you're just creating the same pattern that you're trying to loop yourself out of. That's not the answer.
yeah,
It's literally this, you're literally doing the thing that you're trying to not do. And
yeah,
you're doing
yeah,
it with the tool that you're
yeah.
trying to break yourself, So
Yeah, I'm going to
that's like,
meditate
yeah,
really hard, and it's going to be
really hard.
perfect, and I'm going to do it best. And
For days and weeks on it. Yeah. So it's like, and you can really break yourself into that. Um, yeah. But it's having that discernment and I guess listening into the wisdom within yourself, but then finding reliable sources as well to support you in that journey, to know that you don't have to do it all on your own and that there are people that can support you, and sometimes medicines that can support you, be they like traditional medicines, they have their place and they certainly help give people maybe the window of tolerance to be able to step into some things. And then more, unconventional medicines or, psychedelics that can be supportive as well in just helping to unlock the vault that might be, behind the key that you need to go into. So they're not a panacea, but they can certainly offer a doorway in, to a deeper place.
100%. And what role do you kind of find that community and culture and even the environment that we're in plays in our healing process?
What role does it
Yes.
play? Well, it's so huge, isn't it? Like, because we're part of the culture. Like, we can do only so much internally, and then we have the culture that's around us. And is that saying culture eats strategy for breakfast? So we can do a lot, but if our environment isn't conducive to the changes that we make, and you see that a lot in family systems, don't you? Where a person makes all these lovely changes, they maybe move city, they make all these lovely changes, and then they go back for Christmas and they're back to being a teenager or a child, and they're back into that same family system. And so, like, there's a huge impact that we have on each other relationally, co-regulation, but also in terms of stimulating and sparking each other. So as we start to do more of this work in the world, we can bring more of this healing, more of this peace, more of this return to joy. But then we'll hopefully find more and more communities where that is normative. And then what you slowly start to see in those family systems, because family is our first culture, that there's a little ripple that starts to change. And maybe at a subconscious level, because if you go in and you tell your family they need to change, they're not going to change. They don't want to hear that from you. So, but if you can be a little bit of the change and you start to change within yourself, well, that ripples out. And over time, change happens. Change is inevitable anyway. And so the culture is changing. It is constantly changing. And we can build more supports by being okay with talking about it, okay with supporting more gentle forms of parenting where it's okay to be with emotion. I've sat in the supermarket and Super Value here on the floor with my daughter having a tantrum, and she's just full on gone for it. And I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing. And I've had the staff going, "Are you all right?" And it's like, perfectly fine. We are just here holding space and it's fine. And there's no shame or guilt, or it's just a small child overwhelmed by a supermarket that puts a lot of very tasty, tempting things. And when you have to say or hear no for the 10th time in a supermarket, it's a lot for a little kid. It's a
Mm.
lot. Um, and yeah, I think the more we can see people maybe do things like that, hold space for tantrums in public places without, pulling them or dragging them and going, stop that, or boys don't cry, or these little ways of being, the more we can see women breastfeeding in public, then it normalizes it and it says to the parent, the new mum who maybe would like to, but doesn't maybe have the support of somebody, isn't really sure, the uncertainty goes, okay, maybe it is something I can do, because the nourishment and the connection that gives both mom and baby are massive. So as our culture starts to shift and change, I think it really has a profound impact in the how that we are in the world. And it's necessary, but we can always be doing more. So schools, communities, yeah, like we need to be bringing these topics more and more to the fore in all of them.
Absolutely. And I think it's really, it like brings me so much hope and joy, and to think that we're in such exciting times, that we're, being able to rewrite the script and the blueprint that we've been given down, and that's been passed down. And now we have these opportunities with more awareness to do these things with our children, and yeah, hold that space that, wasn't available for us. No, through no fault of our parents, so just the awareness wasn't there. um, and the culture kind of kept a lid on it, so to speak.
Yeah,
We have this huge
yeah,
opportunity, and I see amazing things happening here in Ireland, in people I'm with, and on retreats, communities, and just a level of support, and connection, and also, signposting. People are like, oh, have you tried this, have you gone there, and knowledge sharing,
yeah,
resources. And it's a really exciting time, I think. And I
yeah,
really feel like people need to see that and not get so bogged down in like the fear that's being projected out there into the world, that the
mm,
world is burning on fire. There's wonderful
yeah,
people like you and good communities doing good work, and there's
yeah.
a lot to be happy for.
And you do see it, like, don't you? Like, you do see there's like the people now have such a stronger language of understanding around their emotions, a deeper sense of connection with themselves. And like, as that ripples out and as we do it, and as you say, through no fault of our parents, this isn't it, never about blaming the previous generations or anybody. Everybody does the best that they can with the resources that they have at the time. And now that we know that, and we have such a great opportunity to look at our own experience, our own trauma, and resilience. Like, we're the survivors of children and people who went to war. Like, we're the survivors. So the transgenerational trauma is one part, but transgenerational resilience is another, and it doesn't get spoken about as much. And so I think when we look at, like, wow, we also got gifted a lot of strength and courage and tenacity. And if we don't pathologize the being human, which is a little bit, you know, unfortunate at times and wonderful, if we don't pathologize it, then it's a real doorway into the spiritual, into the safety, connection, community support, and everything changes from that place.
Mm, absolutely. And I think there's a real shift in the kind of stigma around these kind of things, about, being able to speak about your emotions, your vulnerability. If, if things aren't going well, it's okay to get in touch with a therapist. And even all of
Mm,
that are huge steps, on the mental health journey that I think Ireland is kind of going through, working on this years of repression and
mm,
trauma, famine and scarcity, and
yeah,
all these kind of things. And as well, I'd like to touch on, the psychedelic work as well. It's like there's a huge shift in the stigma around psychedelics. We had the first psychedelic conference in Ireland last year in Trinity College. I went to that university and couldn't believe, it's like, wow, I'm sitting here 8 years later at a psychedelic conference in Trinity. I would have never have thought it would have come that fast.
mm,
Um, but the psychedelic work is also amazing. It's not like you said, it's not a panacea. It's not a golden magic pill or magic bullet, and it's not to replace these other practices, but it can really kind of support people on
mm.
that kind of journey.
Yeah, and like I think if it's, done with like good preparation, so a person feels really resourced going into it, and that whoever is facilitating it have good hands to hold what might be coming up for them, and that they've at least dug a little bit into what's the trauma that's been held in their body. So nice preparation, and that they've uncovered and managed to find their way to regulation or find their way back to that ventral vagal state in the experience of that trauma. Because I think when psychedelics can go wrong is when a person takes them and it opens the door to their trauma and they didn't know. And then it's like all hell breaks, and it can be very overwhelming, like psychotic and just quite scary for a person, but going in resourced and prepared, and then, titrating even in the dose, then it can be a really wonderful tool for healing. And I've seen that for people where, they've tried a lot of different things and you would say maybe treatment resistant at some level. And there's just huge levels of compassion for
Mm.
self, huge levels of sense of connection to spirit, to themselves. So much love and joy and laughter and sadness, and it all just flows from them. And psilocybin is such a wonderful ally and can be. And I love this time of year because if you think about the trees are falling from nature is literally showing us how to let go. And then these little mushrooms are growing from under our feet. Obviously, be very careful if you go picking any. But like they're growing up and it's like nature is saying, let go, let go. This is a time of letting go, this kind of autumn. And so, yeah, then it's integration. So I've done some fabulous integration work with people that, they'd been on ayahuasca journeys, and they'd done a bunch of them. Now, I'm personally not into ayahuasca. I'm much more interested in things that are locally and indigenous to our culture than taking something and extracting it from another culture without the cultural support, shall we say. And doing some integration work with this, person, and what came up in the integration was this deep, and the same patterns were emerging repeatedly in their journeys, but this deep sense of abandonment in a cot, and so without the integration, that would have been lost, so we can have these experiences, but it's really good integration work that actually makes it make sense. So the abandonment was being repeated and repeated, and so it's just very fascinating to see how integration and how bring it into the body, make it a lived experience in your life, not just then an experience that you've had and you've moved on from and tried. I did that, now on to the next thing. What else do I need to do to heal myself? It's like, no,
Lots.
what really happened? And as you journey it into the body, there's an unfolding that's remarkable, and unique to each person. And you can't, and then that's where setting a very clear intention is so important with this work, isn't it? Like, it's just so important. And then the same with, the likes of MDMA, how it can support people into letting down the barriers and some of those protective layers so they can be more compassionate with themselves, particularly with PTSD. And what we're seeing out of the MAPS research, like just 2/3 of people no longer having PTSD. Like, that's incredible. Like, to imagine that you no longer have symptoms of something that lives in this moment. And then, for couples, how that can just really dissolve those resentments and blocks that build up when people are caught in these cycles and patterns. So there's a lot to be said for how they can support people, but obviously with caution and support. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so exciting to be involved in the space right now, and to see how all of these different medicines, even ketamine for treatment resistant depression, ibogaine and iboga for chronic addiction, and
Mm,
psilocybin for end of life anxiety. There's all of these, plagues of conditions on humanity that we now potentially have antidotes for.
mm,
And it's not to bypass the work. It's always like coming home, really, isn't it? It's like
yeah,
being able to feel and move the energy and move from this suppression to expression. And it's just, yeah, really, really exciting to
yeah,
finally acknowledge, and because the science is kind of catching up. We love the
yeah,
science, so it's kind of like science is showing that, what we've known anecdotally for years, and a lot of underground therapists have known for years, that these work for a lot of people.
yeah.
But the most important thing is having, somebody who's trained,
Mm,
um, having the correct preparation, having the correct screening, and
yeah,
then, like you said, the integration. That's where the real magic is for a lot of people. It's not just going from the peak experience to peak experience, and
mm,
people get trapped in that, like just going to ayahuasca ceremonies or going to the next one, going to the next one, and not actually,
Yeah.
pulling what they've learned about themselves and, like you said, bringing it into
Yeah.
their lives and embodying it and making that change. So yeah, the integration work, and it's wonderful you do that because it's so important and so
Mm.
needed, because I've heard so many times that people go to different types of retreats or ceremonies and then they're just like kicked back out into the world, and they
Yeah.
don't have the support and they don't have someone there to do the integration work and to follow up with them and to
Yeah.
help ground them and regulate them. So I'm really passionate about, making sure that if people are going to do this work and we want to do it for a long time and we want to make
Yeah.
it legal, especially here in this country, that
Yeah.
we do our due diligence and do it in the right way, and cross the
Yeah.
T's and dot the I's. So it's wonderful that you're also helping support people through that
Yeah.
process.
Well, it's so important because even if you imagine like on a yoga mat, you meet yourself. Like in my 20s, I met my competitive, self. You go on a retreat like ayahuasca, psilocybin, whatever it is, you're going to meet yourself. You're going to meet some deep, dark parts of yourselves and maybe some really light and lovely ones, but you're going to meet yourself and there's no getting away from it. So the you that is in there, she or he is coming out. And so then to make sense of that, and as you say, we're a dopamine addicted culture, we like our smartphones, we like our coffee or whatever it is. So then we can become addicted to the peak, the high, or the what comes with that without really embedding it in our systems and seeing, well, how does this help me make sense of my world? And slowing it down a little bit can be the greatest thing. No more than you said earlier, we can run and keep trying to get loads of these different experiences in our lives, but it can be just overwhelming then in your system. You can really fry it. So it's really important. Yeah, I think integration it's the key, really. It's the why that you did it in the first place, is
Mm-hmm.
how to pull that insight into your life.
Mm, absolutely. And I'm curious, do you see any kind of like limitations on the work of psychedelics, in particular with trauma work, or do you see any
Well, I think
positive
like
potential?
yeah, I think when it comes to people with trauma, it probably needs to be handled in a slightly different way than in a group setting, possibly, because there have been, I'm sure you've heard of stories of these as well, or people that they into a group setting and maybe their trauma is playing out with the experience or the medicine, and somebody else's maybe rage or trauma is playing out there, and it can really lead to a lot of freeze states and a lot of dysregulation for a person when they're seeing somebody, and even though that person maybe can't do anything because they're tripping as well, it can really bring a lot of fear into a system. So for some people where there's a lot of stuff that needs to be unpacked, more likely a one-to-one journey would be a safer space than in a big group, because in a big group there's a lot to be there's a lot that can be beautiful about it, because there's a lot of sharing in that community can be extraordinary. But then if there's particular individuals with certain things that may even be unknown to them, it can just bring up a lot more stuff that may need a lot more care and attention. So I think when we're talking about trauma, we have to be very careful. And as you say, screening is really important. You need to be very sure that the group makeup, if it's a group setting, is going to be conducive to everybody. And it isn't about having a pleasant experience, but everybody having a supportive experience.
Yeah, great
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that point. It's like, a lot of people might have this expectation in their mind they're going to come in and see shapes and colors, but it's like, yeah, you can be dragged through the bushes and down the dark holes and into the caves that you're afraid of. But
yeah,
that's where the gold is sometimes. So it's not
yeah.
easy sometimes.
And sometimes I think that's it. Like there's an expectation. It's going to be all nice and light and fluffy. And it's like, at times, that is not what happens. And it can be terrifying and extraordinarily painful
Mhm.
and, yeah, difficult, really difficult. And so it's not to turn people off, but it is for them to know that, you're intentionally taking something that's going to bring you on a journey. That journey, it's a roll of the dice, and having a good support system. within yourself, having a good support system around you, having a good team support you, all those things are really important. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as facilitators, we can never control the outcome.
Yeah.
It's
No.
magic and mystical and
Yeah.
works in its own mysterious ways. And I always say to people, it's like the experience that you have may not necessarily be the one that you want, but it is the one that you need in that moment in
Yeah.
time to work through
Yeah.
whatever is coming up, whatever needs to
Mhm.
be released, whatever needs to
Yeah.
be expressed. And that can be tricky, can
Yeah.
be difficult and
Yeah.
challenging. And I think even the research out of John Hopkins has shown that people who have those challenging experiences when they're in these supportive environments, and they're not bad trips, they're just challenges
Mhm.
to go through, that they're some of the most beneficial. People get to have the best results
Yeah.
and report, spiritual and mystical experiences, and they followed up with them, and they show that these
Mm.
experiences are actually the most worthwhile.
Beautiful. Yeah. And because it's taking you to uncover something. You're going to uncover something one way or the other. You're going to learn something. May not be what you wanted to learn, what you went in with hoping for. Um, but there's a lot to be said for the journey and the support. And even if all they get from that, even if the journey was difficult, but that they could feel the somatic resonance of your support as a facilitator, that in itself can rewrite patterns that were laid down at younger years. And what I love about psychedelics, psilocybin in particular, is the metaplasticity that happens within a person's brain. Their brain goes through this massive growth stage in the weeks, days, and weeks after. So it starts to establish new neural connections around, maybe in terms of the journey, maybe they connected with love, maybe at a deeper level than they ever had, or spirituality. And so these new neurons start to fire together and wire together. And in the trauma work that we're doing, we're unfiring and unwiring neurons that basically have become compatible together, become locked together. And so as we unfire them and as we allow new neural pathways to emerge, we create such possibility for people's lives, such immense possibility for where they can take themselves in terms of their happiness, in terms of their sense of contentment within themselves, and maybe what they do in the world. So it's,
Mm,
yeah, and their
mm.
relationships with other people. So as they
Yeah.
get that, that, and no more than the person that takes the heroin, as we, journey with a particular medicine, or as you're in a therapy room with somebody and you can co-regulate off of them, you feel their energy and they bring, you borrow that for a little while. You borrow that and then you come to own it for yourself. And it's just like you do with a pet. As you co-regulate with the pet, you borrow their energy, their gorgeous high energy for a while. And then you own it for yourself and you're like, oh, that's, babies don't self-soothe. They co-regulate off adults, that they learn to borrow that from the adult nervous system. And then eventually they're like, oh, I have it now. And we have to do it repeatedly as babies. Then as we do it as therapists, we can really help a person find that sense of groundedness within themselves. And then if we bring people on journeys with the likes of mushrooms or MDMA, then they can see, oh, the spirit of these medicines, they give it to, oh, I have that too. And now I have an anchor point of, oh, that's what love feels like. Maybe I never felt that before in my life, but I feel it now. Like I actually have a point to go to, a place that is real and tangible. And it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love the relationship reparative effects that
Mm.
doing this work can have for us, especially people who maybe didn't grow up with a mother or father, or were in abusive family dynamics and systems, and never had that kind of like regulated
Mm.
blueprint there. It can do wonders for our nervous system. Sue, it's been absolutely wonderful conversation. I'm sure we could probably keep on going on, but I won't hold you too much longer. Is there anything you'd like to share that we haven't touched on today with the audience? Was there any topic or anything you'd like to wrap up on, or a closing thought even?
A closing thought. There's loads of thoughts coming in now, so just be discerning. Yeah, like if you feel called to any of this work, it's so, yeah, it'll resonate with your spirit. You'll know if it does or it doesn't, and it'll resonate with some level, and you'll be like, yeah, that's something worth exploring. And there are people out there. There's me. There's Dara. There's that are doing some of the work in the world in this way. For me, I think probably the closing bit is, one, it's been a joy to talk with you, but this work is about bringing us home to joy. That's what I feel like. That's what I feel like I do every day. And I love those days when, you know, I sit with a person and they found it. They have it. And you're like, you've got it. It's there. It's within you now. And it wasn't that they had to seek it from outside themselves. It was already there. They found it in here. And I'm not doing anything bar supporting, guiding, a little bit safe cracking, because I maybe know some of the codes to help them read their body, and I'll help them to do that. But it's ultimately your the doorway to your future is in your heart. So just follow your heart. Yeah, it'll guide you home.
Beautiful. What a beautiful closing thought. Sue, thank you so much. A lot of joy in this conversation. I had so much fun chatting to you and getting to hear all about the wonderful work that you do.
I
You want to
might
add
say
one more
one.
thing?
I want to say one more thing. So if
Oh,
people are looking for this kind of work, you can find me on sueredmond.com, and I've day retreats where we touch into a little bit of this sacred anger stuff. So a little bit of that may come up, and then I've weekend retreats and a retreat planned for the Netherlands, just women's only around Bridget. So things like that. So yeah, just to say that.
yeah, wonderful, Sue. I was going to say, well, I'll pop all the links to you and your upcoming work then in the show notes. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. It's been such a joy. Please do share, like. You can find all the notes. All the links will be in the notes. You can sign up to the newsletter to hear about the upcoming episodes. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much, Sue, for your time and presence and the good work you're doing here, especially in Ireland. We're in exciting times. So thanks. And I look forward to chatting again.